Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and in today's video I'm going to try and help answer the question, should I come back to WoW for War Within? Now full disclosure, I'm a pretty focused player on Mythic Plus and raids generally, a pretty high-end level in both of those forms of content, but I'm going to try and make this video to have a bit more of a broad coverage of all the different parts of the game that are changing, all the new features being added in War Within, to try and help give you kind of an idea of what the new expansion is going to look like, help you make a decision on if you want to come play World of Warcraft either for the first time or again. Really again, because a lot of this isn't going to make much sense for you if you've never played WoW at all before. And it's mostly going to focus just on the PvE side of things. PvP is actually getting a little bit of changes in War Within. It's getting taken out of the Great Vault, and they're kind of just ramping up Conquest so that you can just buy everything you want instead of having that RNG in the Great Vault. But other than that, I don't have too much knowledge or insight into PvP. So let's start off with kind of the flagship. I would say there are two flagship features of War Within. Let's start off with the one that's more gameplay oriented, and that is hero talents. Hero talents are an additional talent tree, but you get all the talents, but there are some choice nodes. So it's a little different than the regular talent tree. And the way that it works is that every spec has access to two hero talent trees, and you share one with another spec. Like each one you share with one other spec. So for instance, for shamans, Totemic is shared by Resto Shamans and Enhancement Shamans. Farseers is shared between Resto Shamans and Elemental Shamans. And then there's a third one that Resto Shaman can't play that's shared by Elemental and Enhance called Stormbringer. And each of these hero talent trees have a little bit of gameplay twist to them, a medium amount of aesthetic twist to them. For instance, Totemic transforms your healing rain into a totem that basically casts a bunch of healing rains. And so it doesn't actually necessarily add new keybinds to your bar. A lot of them won't add a new keybind to your bar, and instead will either replace a keybind or just be passive effects, right? This replaces something, and this is a passive effect that procs off a different button that you press. And then most of these talents, they're fairly passive. They're fairly low impact. So if you're worried about, say, bloat or confusingness, I would say that that's not something you have to worry too much about. A lot of them offer little ways for you to min-max for sure, but they're also very much sets of, I would say, pretty simple stuff. And they'll often say like, hey, you should probably talent some of these things, right? Like, oh, Farseer says Unleash Life calls an ancestor to your side. Okay, you should probably talent Unleash Life if you want to play this tree, but that's kind of the extent of the impact that these need to have for you if you are, worried more about the bloat, and very, very few of them will add even a single button to your keyboard, and I don't think any of them add more than one button to your keyboard across all the classes. The hero talents range in coolness from super cool, like there's a Death Knight that can just be permanently mounted in combat outdoors, or in combat indoors they can temporarily mount as well. That's an option on that tree. Very cool effect. So that's like Rider of the Apocalypse, Death Knight, slam dunk. You've got a lot of classic staples, like Druids of the Claw, Dark Rangers. Then there's, some really cool ones for paladins with Templars and Heralds of the Sun and stuff. Mages just have three fantastic ones: Spellslingers, Frostfire mages, and Sun Fury, which is basically like Kelthus themed. You get Sun Fury spheres behind you, and your cooldown calls a phoenix that starts, hurling spells at stuff and consuming your spheres, and it's very cool. There's a lot of very cool ones. There's a couple of ones that are a bit more mid, would maybe be a nice word for some of them, but they've been doing some passes to improve those throughout the beta cycle, and of course it's a subjective thing, right? My mid might be your treasure, so that's one of the key features of War Within. And then the other one is, I would say it's a little bit more kind of meta and a little bit less for this expansion. This is one of those changes that, like, I'm just really excited that the game is getting in general, but it's not so much a War Within thing. It's like I'm just excited in general about this. So this feature is called Warbands, and the basic idea they've summarized as account-wide everything. So Warbands, superficially, like when you go to the login screen, your Warband is going to be there. It's going to be your 4 characters of your choice sitting around a campfire. But the basic idea is that all of your characters are now part of one Warband. And within that Warband, a lot of stuff is shared. For instance, reputations. All the reputations from War Within are going to be shared, and they're going to work through the backlog of old reputations and add them to the warband reputations thing. So no longer do you need to grind the same rep on a second character. You can grind the rep on any character, and it will be shared across your warband. Notably, there isn't going to be ways to cheese this. Like, you play your second character, you're not going to get double the warband XP. There are going to be a lot of quests that reward a one-time warband XP or warband rep reward with certain things. So it shouldn't be too. It should be, I think, pure upside there. But also transmogs. You're going to be able to collect transmogs for your entire warband, even if it's different armor types. So if you are a clothy, you can go back and do Throne of Thunder for a transmog run, and you can get plate transmog, you can get paladin tier transmog, you can get all of those old mogs. Whatever drops, it's going into your warband mog collection, which for me is a really cool thing. Warbands also come with a functional change as well, which is that they're adding a bunch of gear that's called Warbound Until Equipped gear. So, you do a dungeon, and there's a lot of like normal gear that you can find that drops in a dungeon, but there will also be some pieces of Warbound Until Equipped gear that can drop from these dungeons and from raids, and they can also be purchased from delves, which we'll talk about in a bit, with the currency that you get from the delves. And the basic idea is, like, if you're doing some content that awards item level 600 gear when you finish it, you might also get a piece of item level 590 Warbound gear, and you can just mail that over. So you say you're playing your shaman, like this is my little shaman here. I go and do a raid, and I could find like a really cool warrior sword or something. I don't know if there are a lot of cool special effects ones, but I could find a sword that a warrior could use, or some plate shoulders or whatever, and they're a little bit lower item level than the stuff that comes from the raid. It's just personal loot. It shows up for me. It's not tradable to anybody else in the raid, and I can just mail that over to my alt. And by doing a bunch of content throughout the game, you're going to be getting this Warbound gear that you can then use to help your alts start off at a higher item level, or you can just play the alts and they'll progress faster than if you're trying to gear them through this Warbound gear. It is a little bit lower item level than whatever else comes from that content. So overall, I think an extremely neat feature. I think Warbands really are doing a good job of kind of bringing the game into a modern... Like, just grinding the same rep on a second character has never felt good to me. That's always been a very annoying thing anytime I've done it. And getting account-wide transmogs, even of different armor types, and then Warbound gear to make the alt, it gives you a reason to fire up an alt, and it also reduces that period of your alt feeling super-duper weak, which is often a pretty nasty time in the life cycle of an alt character. Not for me, of course, but for the 4 people that are bringing my alt characters through their keystone. Speaking of keystones, Mythic Plus is undergoing some changes. There's been some affix changes. They've lobbed one of the rows of affixes and replaced it with a bunch of kind of, I would say, unimpactful but unexciting affixes, is the current state of beta right now. So they took one of the affix rows and they basically replaced it with, like, all the casters get 20% more haste throughout this dungeon, but you deal like 10% more shadow damage, 10% more nature damage, and then there's like a couple different ones like that. So most different damage types are represented as having a week where you get to do more damage in keys, and then the mobs become slightly better, but like slightly more dangerous, either the casters or the non-casters, depending on the week, but not like in a way that will be super noticeable or impactful to you, not in the way that you're going to see it on the screen with like swirlies or anything like that. Just the mobs are going to be, ignoring some of your armor, casting a bit faster, doing a bit more damage, that kind of stuff. I'm personally not a huge fan of those. I don't think they're particularly exciting affixes, but I will say on the side of Mythic Plus that the Mythic Plus system side of things is something they've indicated there's going to be some big changes to in the coming weeks. So stay tuned to this channel if you want to see those. Mythic Plus also has a set of 8 new dungeons, as every new season or every new expansion these days does have. And I would say these ones, so we're only going to get 4 of these in the first season for Mythic Plus. And the dungeons are pretty cool. The aesthetics of these dungeons are 10 out of 10. The flavor as well. Like Cinder Vermetery, I think, is an early candidate for one of the coolest dungeons, one of the most flavorful dungeons of all time. It's going to be in the second season of M+, not the first season. But then there's the Dawnbreaker, where you take over a ship and like an airship, and that's kind of you traveling around the dungeon with this airship being part of the story. It's very cool. There's a Sacred Flame Priory, a church thing that you're attacking in this dungeon. A couple ones in the Nerubian area, because in terms of the story, you're sort of starting off on this Isle of Doran where the Earthen are chilling, and then you go into Kazalgar under the ground, and you've got the Nerubian area, the kind of mines area, and then this big area that basically feels like an outdoor world that is got these Arathi humans down here and their churches and stuff, and it is definitely a pretty neat aesthetic. If you haven't seen any pictures of the Hallowfall zone or whatever, I'll let you decide whether you want to spoil yourself and go take a look, but it is very cool. That's my excuse for not putting up, by the way, the images right now like a good high production quality YouTube channel would do. I'm going to say it's to allow you to prevent spoilers, although you wouldn't be watching this video this way if you were really trying to avoid spoilers. But anyways, that's my excuse. That's my excuse for not doing any editing on this content. So let's go into the outdoor world side of things away from M+. The outdoor world kind of endgame loop is, I think, a big thing that they are targeting in this expansion, which for me, that's not one of the big selling points of the expansion, but for a lot of players, this is a group of players that they feel, I think, has been underserved, and they are trying to give you basically like a way that you can be a World of Warcraft player that logs in, plays World of Warcraft, gets rewards, gets a character that's more powerful, has fun, has different exciting things you can do, involving solo content, outdoor world content with your 2 buddies, content with your 3 buddies, content with your 1 buddy, any kind of combination of stuff like that. So the main mechanism by which they're attempting this is a mechanic called delves. Delves are basically like little quest areas or little dungeons, I guess, that you can do with 1 to 5 people. And you'll go in, and Bran in season 1 is going to help you, although the person who's going to help you is going to change throughout the seasons. And you can go in, you can go and set it to any different tier, which they have different eye level recommendations for those, right? If you're doing tier 11, you want an unfathomable challenge, and then all of the other ones are kind of based on item level tiering, which these highest tier ones are pretty high item level recommendations. The lower tier ones, though, are very doable, and notably, you get good rewards out of these in terms of gear. You'll get heroic raid gear equivalent item level out of your weekly vault. If you can do at least tier 8 delves, or exactly tier 8 delves, because tiers 9, 10, and 11 don't improve the rewards of the delve. They just they don't improve the gear rewards. They're just going to give you maybe some new cosmetics or currency, that kind of stuff. But you can cap your vault out with just these tier 8 delves, which are not too nasty. They're recommended for people in normal raid gear, which you can farm item level 600 gear out of your vaults from the lower tier delves. Get up here, you can climb up to this without ever having to do any group content, or you can do it with a little bit lower than the recommendation, and that'll also definitely be doable. It's untimed, although you do have a death limit as you get to these higher tier delves. That does kick in the delves you hear. There isn't any of that in the top tier delves. And they're basically, you can watch, I've got a video that I'll put a little link to if you want to see some footage of me going through some delves. They feel pretty much, like you go in and a bunch of enemies and you fight them, and there's sometimes little wacky things that happen and event things, and you can get some powers that make your character better, sort of like Torghast, but you don't choose stuff. They don't key into your character's kit. You can just get a power that's like, hey, for the rest of this delve, you can double jump, and when you double jump, you get a heal over time effect on you. Or like, hey, for the rest of this delve, you get a bunch of stats, but if you drop below 2/3 health, that goes away. Or get a big shield, and once the shield gets broken through, it explodes for a bunch of damage, right? Like those sorts of powers are in the delves in beta right now, and I'm sure we'll be seeing more as beta progresses. That's something that will definitely be happening. In addition to that, at the end of the delve, there will be a bunch of chests you can open, but some of them will be locked. And in order to open those chests, you're going to need to get keys. And keys come from doing outdoor world content, which includes, there's a bunch of like new event things, reminiscent of stuff like the Siege on Dragonbane Keep, the Time Rifts, that kind of stuff in the outdoor world. There's also a new, I would describe this as replacement for the Emissary system, where there are special assignment world quests that in order to unlock them, you have to complete 3 other world quests in that zone. And then these can have veteran gear in them, which is LFR raid level gear, so quite good for outdoor world content gear that you can get. And you can get these from these special assignment world quests, which are, again, sort of replacing that emissary quest spot from Shadowlands and BFA and Legion. So I think a pretty elegant way of doing this, and yeah, that's a pretty cool thing they're doing there. Okay. So that's the outdoor world kind of end game loop. being added in there. And again, that's filling up now the bottom row of the Great Vault where you get gear every week, replacing what used to be PvP in this spot. Finally, we have the raid. There's going to be a raid. There'll probably be more. There will definitely be more throughout the expansion, but we're starting off with Nerubar Palace, where you're going into the Nerubians' place, you're killing off their queen, and there's a bunch of other cool enemies in here, the cool void theme and stuff going on. So far on the beta, we've tested 5 of the 8 bosses, and there are 2 more that we will test. The last boss always goes untested these days, but the first 7 will be getting tested on the beta in the next several weeks. I have videos up of these bosses that we have tested so far, and what I will say is that they've been hitting a pretty high mark for me in terms of how cool they seem from the heroic raid testing, especially Nexus Princess Kaivexa, Kaiveza. This boss is a really, really cool encounter so far. So if you want to go take a look at that, I'll put a link in the description so you can go see what the raid testing looks like. If you prefer to not see any of the raid bosses until it actually comes out, I don't blame you. I'd be right there with you. I make the videos and do the testing because it helps my guild and because it's good content. But personally, I'd love it if none of this got tested until the expansion came out. So if that's your take, I do not blame you. There is one final note about this, which is in terms of timing. So timing for War Within in general, there is a 4-day early access that you can, if you buy the Epic Edition, you can play during that time. Otherwise, you can't. You can't do any of the weekly lockout stuff during then, but you could level a bunch of characters. You could level up your character and then, be ready to hit the ground running when the actual expansion launch date comes out. I think it's kind of icky, but it is what it is. That's something worth knowing about. That is August 22nd you can start playing if you are buying the early access. Otherwise, it's the 26th. And then September 10th, I think, is when the first season starts. But it doesn't start with Mythic Raid being open. And potentially it might not start with Mythic Plus being open. It might just be Mythic Dungeons, Mythic Zero Dungeons, which if you were last playing more than a few months ago, Mythic Zero Dungeons are substantially harder than they used to be. They're sort of like what +8s or +9s kind of used to feel like. And they squished all that. So now if you're doing a +2 key, it's sort of like what a +11 or a +12 used to feel like. And they've squished all of the stuff below +10s kind of into M0s. So you've got some cool, somewhat difficult, untimed content that you can be up to. Wow, this person just got an achievement. That's cool. And that's something that you can do during maybe the September 10th week. And then there's going to be the Mythic Raid, the first LFR wing opening up, I think, on September 17th and potentially M+. We don't know for sure how the M+ release schedule is looking. Anyways, that is what we know about War Within so far that I could remember to put down in my notepad document before I started recording this video. Let me know in the comments if there's something that I missed. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about this expansion. Let me know in the comments what you're excited for, what you're not excited for in this expansion. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.